Catholic.
Why can't women become priests?
1-833-288-EWTN.
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-833-288-3986.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Call to Communion here on EWTN. This program is just for you if you're a non-Catholic. This program is also for you if you are a Catholic, but you've got some questions that perhaps a friend or a coworker has posed and you just don't have the answer. In either case, we are here for you. Here's our phone number, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're listening to us outside of North America, please dial the number 1 and then 205-271-2985. You can also shoot us an email if you prefer. The address for that, ctc@ewtn.com, ctc@ewtn.com. Charles Beery is our producer. Matt Kabinski is our phone screener. Jeff Burson is on social media. If you want to ask a question via YouTube or Facebook, we're streaming there right now. And all you have to do is put your question in the comments box. Jeff will see it. He'll send it to us, and off we go. I'm Tom Price, along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Very well. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing decent, thank you.
How is your Lent going?
You know, it's
chugging along?
Adequately supplied with lentils.
There you go.
Lentils for Lent.
Lentils for Lent. I like that a lot. So here's a great question from Michael, rather timely as we are in Lent now, approaching the Triduum. Michael says, a Jewish friend asked me why we say Good Friday for the day of crucifixion. How is it a good day?
Yeah, because Catholics believe that the death of Christ was an atonement for sin for those of the whole world, and the principal act of Christ's redemption that he accomplished for us. So the cross is, well, that was a horrific human event.
Yeah.
It was a boon to the human race.
About as good as it gets.
That's right.
All right, very good. And Michael, thanks so much for your email. Here's one from Paul that came in yesterday. Paul says, I am an Orthodox Christian. How does the Catholic Church view the salvation of Christians from other denominations? He may mean Orthodox Christians.
We're strongly in favor of it.
Yeah. Because we are not in communion with the Catholic Church, are we still considered able to go to heaven?
Yeah, the Catholic position is that anyone can go to heaven that dies with the grace of God in their soul, dies in God's friendship, and that while the teaching and sacraments of the Catholic Church are the most manifest, objective, and sufficient means to bring a person into contact with that grace and to maintain them in it, there are elements of grace and truth and sanctification outside the formal boundaries of Catholicism. And in fact, the Catholic Church would regard the Eastern churches as particularly close to us in theology and sacraments. And certainly, therefore, would regard salvation as something that the Orthodox can achieve, and Protestants and members of non-Christian religions as well, if they're faithful to their consciences and to the grace of God that may be present to them in extraordinary ways. It's worth mentioning that I think, if memory serves me correct, I believe that John Paul II referred specifically to Seraphim of Sarov, who's an modern Orthodox saint, as a saint.
Okay.
So I can think of at least one instance when a Roman pontiff singled out a member of the Orthodox Communion and celebrated for their sanctity.
There you go, Paul. Thanks so much for your email. Here's one now from Kent. Kent says, is there instruction in the Catholic faith about action or intention in the dream state? That is, if one commits a sin in a dream, is it considered a sin? Would one need to confess that sin? What are the ramifications of an intention or action in the dream state compared to our intention or actions in the waking state? And finally, is it in the intention of the person or the action where the sin is actually counted? In my experience, sometimes we do have the choice while dreaming. I do enjoy listening to your show. Thanks, Kent.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question, Kent. So the Catholic position on moral responsibility is that it is our freedom that makes us morally responsible, and our freedom emerges from our rationality. It's precisely our capacity to be rational that gives us our ability to choose between goods rationally conceived. That's just not something that we possess, generally speaking, when dreaming. These are unconscious memories, thoughts, and desires that surface without our conscious deliberation, and we're often more the sort of the victims of our thoughts, or sort of floating effervescently on the effluvia of our subconscious, as it were. And so it's not an area of moral responsibility. Now, you said that there are times when you may have been conscious of agency in the dream state, and one can have more or less awareness that one is dreaming. I still think most Catholic moral theologians would say that even that kind of vague sense of agency that one possesses in the dream state wouldn't rise to the level of moral culpability. And no, it's not confessional matter. Now, it's different if you're Dennis Quaid in the movie Dreamscape. Do you remember that one, Tom?
I don't.
Oh, yeah. It was a science fiction film back in the 80s about people who had the ability to project themselves into others' dreams and to do mayhem, manifest all kind of mayhem, kind of like that Leonardo DiCaprio film. Can't think of the name. You know the one where you project yourself into somebody else's dreams and cause all kinds of mayhem? I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay. I'm sure you will.
That would be different, but nobody can do that.
Okay, very good. Well, this is actually quite a relief for me. I had a dream maybe about a week ago that I saw an old friend, a friend of my wife and I, a woman.
Inception, that was it.
Oh, okay, very good. And in this dream, in conversation to this woman, and Adrienne was not around, I said this terrible phrase that I would never use, not only on the air, but in my own life. I don't think I've ever said it. And yet here it pops out of my head in a dream, pops out of my mouth, and I'm going, why did I say that? Dreams are bizarre, aren't they?
Yeah, now, you just put me in mind of the old song, Mr. Sandman, Bring Me a Dream. You remember that?
Boom, boom, boom. Yes. You ready? The Chordettes, 1956. It was on Cadence Records, and it was on a maroon label.
There you go. I knew you'd know that.
Oh, boy, yeah. More garbage that won't get me to heaven. In a moment here, we're going to talk with Cindy right here in Birmingham. And we have a couple lines open for you as well at 833-288-EWTN. If you have a question for Dr. David Anders on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon, 833-288-3986. Call to communion here on EWTN. Do stay with us.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
Dominica and Vince Clark have set the bar for having a large family. Dominica recently gave birth to quintuplets, yes, 5 babies. Charles, Henry, Elizabeth, Evangeline, and Ariana are all progressing well at Krakow University Hospital in Poland. Dominica said, "This is something extraordinary that is not given to everyone." Her statement reflects the couple already have 7 older children, aged 12 to 10 months. I'm guessing the older kids already know how to feed babies and change diapers. Mom's approach to having 12 young children is, if you have a system, a calm approach, and a positive attitude, then it's possible to have a really cool life with such a large bunch of children. I think they're going to have a wonderful life.
Follow us on Twitter at Life Issues USA and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
Now, here is today's quote from Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar. Patience is adjusting your time to God's time. Mother Angelica's perpetual calendar with her reflections is available at our religious catalog. Just go to EWTNRC.com. That's EWTNRC.com. Or call 1-800-854-6316. That's 1-800-854-6316.
Glad you could join us for a call to communion here on EWTN. Our phone number 833-288-EWTN. We have several lines open for you right now at 833-288-3986. One of the coolest things, I think, on the EWTN website, which is enormous. We've got a lot of things for a lot of wonderful people, but this is the portion called the Mother Angelica Memorial. It's EWTN's site dedicated to Mother Angelica, where you can celebrate her remarkable life. It's filled with photos and milestones, heartfelt stories, and her wit and words that have inspired the hearts of all ages throughout the years. It's actually a site within a site. Visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica today. EWTN.com/Mother Angelica. If you're ready now, let's go to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. Kicking it off today with Cindy right here in Birmingham, listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Hello, Cindy. What's on your mind today?
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My questions have to do with the pro-evangelium of James. So I have some friends that are in the Melkite Church, and they believe everything that it says, and they have told me that their priests, preach it in homilies and different things. So I asked my Roman Catholic priest, and he said that, yes, in fact, we do get some of our Marian feasts from that source, but that there are also heresies in the pro-evangelium of James. And so my questions are, one, are there actually heresies in it? Two, what are the heresies? And three, why do we think they are heresies if we actually put weight into some of it to, make feasts out of it?
Oh.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I really appreciate the question. So it is true that the Proto-Evangelium of James has a sort of higher status in the Christian East than in the Latin West historically, and the Galasian decretals of the 5th or 6th century specifically censured it as being non-canonical and not reliable. But there are several Orthodox dogmas, in particular the perpetual virginity of Our Lady, that are witnessed to in the text, and so it's an important early text of Christian faith and belief, even though it doesn't rise to the level of canonical literature. It's not inspired. In terms of enumerating the various heresies, to be honest with you, it's been a while since I've looked at the text or the criticisms of it, and so I just can't give you a list right now. I'm sorry I can't answer the question directly. I might be able to do a little research and get back to you.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Cindy, thanks so much for your call, and that opens up a line for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to communion on this Wednesday afternoon here on EWTN. Let's go to Steve now. Steve is in Texas listening on the great Guadalupe Radio. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today? Steve is not quite ready yet. Let me go to this question here. This is from Tony, who says, Dr. Anders, is it correct to ask for intercessory prayer of Jesus and the Holy Spirit to God the Father, since they are all one and the same? Please explain. God bless you, Tony.
Thanks. So the New Testament definitely depicts Christ as being in an intermediary position between us and the Father. He ever lives to make intercession. That's the way the book of Hebrews speaks about him.
All right.
And so it would not be theologically improper to conceive of it in that way. And in fact, we're always pleading the atoning death of Christ on our behalf as we seek to be joined to the Father. And we want to participate in Christ's own filial relationship to God. In fact, that's essential to Christian spirituality, the idea that we know God as Father by participating in the filial love of the Son. And that is a mediated knowledge of God. That's a mediated relationship, mediated through Christ. So mediation is absolutely critical to Jesus' office and the redemption that he wins for us. Now, what you say is also correct, that he is fully God. And so our communion with Christ is both immediate and mediate. There's a mediated aspect to it, and then there's an immediacy to it as well. And so it's not as idiomatic, if you will, in Catholic devotion to say, "Oh, Jesus, pray for us." Right? That kind of language is not typical in Catholic devotionalism. What you would have found in the early centuries of the Church would have been prayers to God the Father through Christ. So there would still be a kind of nod to an acknowledgement, a sensitivity to a primacy of an awareness of Christ's mediation, but it wouldn't have been phrased exactly like that. Oh, Jesus, pray for us. It would be more like, God the Father, have mercy on us through the, the death and resurrection and the ministry of your Son, that kind of thing.
Very good. Tony, thanks so much for your email. Now let's go to Steve in West Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today, sir?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I really love your show. I promote it greatly to my fans, my friends, my family, and everyone. The question I had, I think I know the answer, is there any need for prayer after, I guess you say, after the end of time?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. So, first of all, let's get clarity on end of time. Catholic position is that time doesn't end. Time does not end. And that's because at the end of this world, we will experience a bodily resurrection, and so we will enter into everlasting life in an embodied condition.
Okay.
And time and space are interlocking realities, and so you can't really have one without the other. And so we don't speak of the blessed having a timeless existence. We speak of them enjoying life everlasting. So eternal succession, but not timelessness. So we don't actually believe in the end of time. Now, God is timeless, but our experience of God is not timeless. Faith is of things unseen. That's how the book of Hebrew defines it. And so faith as a theological virtue will cease in the next life for the blessed, because they will have an immediate knowledge, an intuitive knowledge of the divine essence. Now we see as through a glass darkly, then we will see face to face. And so there are aspects of the life of prayer that will no longer pertain. We won't need sacraments. We won't need signs and symbols when we have the real thing.
Yeah.
We won't need to petition God for graces and merits when we are enjoying Him, which is the fruit of redemption. Nevertheless, we are not absorbed into God as drops of water into the ocean. And so the soul maintains its individuality and personality in relationship to God. And so there is even though it is an immediate relationship, it is not a relationship of identity. There is still a communion there, mirrored after the communion interior to the Blessed Trinity, right? And so if you conceive of prayer, as a dialogic communion, then I would say we can still talk about there being prayer, although it'll be very different from the prayer that we presently have. Now, the book of Revelation, chapter 8, says that the angels pray for us and offer our prayers. And, of course, the angels already enjoy the beatific vision. So we have some scriptural warrant for understanding the life of prayer continuing in heaven. Now, East and West have slightly different accounts of the way we think about everlasting life. There's a probably stronger tendency in the West to depict it in a more static mode. There is a tendency in the East, especially in St. Gregory of Nyssa, to think of everlasting life as an infinitely increasing, infinitely deepening penetration into the mystery and the wonder of God. The term for this technical term is epiktasis, from the Greek word meaning to yearn or strive for. And if you've ever read the last of C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia books, The Last Battle, the unicorn, or is it the Pegasus? I can't remember which. One of these horse creatures sort of rears on its hind legs and charges ahead into the Narnia beyond and calls to the others, further up and further in. And that's the image. That's what is evoked in us by this notion of epiktasis. And so there's a fully satisfied, no sense of loss at all, and yet a eager desire to penetrate ever more deeply into the mystery of God and for that journey to continue eternally. I find them both to be delightful images of the next life, but I'm reminded that eye has not seen and ear has not heard what God has in store for those who love Him.
Fascinating. Steve, thanks so much for your call. Call to communion here on EWTN. We have one line open right now at 833-288-EWTN. If you have a question for Dr. David Anders, 833-288-3986. Let's go to Mariana in College Station, Texas, a first-time caller, listening on the great Red Sea Radio. Mariana, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So thanks for taking my call. I actually was thinking about fasting on Fridays, and I don't actually know why we fast from meat on Fridays as Catholics.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. If first of all, the reason Friday and Fridays during Lent is because this is in memory and reflection upon the crucifixion of our Lord. And our Lord went to the cross for us. He suffered the worst possible degradation. And we are called to take up the way of the cross, that our sanctity, our sanctification, requires us to learn how to say no to ourselves and our own egotism and our own narcissistic self-regard and to put others before ourselves. And oftentimes it is our flesh, it is our passions that can impede us. I mean, how many times have I not wanted to get up from the dinner table, to go do something that was needful, or give me a minute, let me finish this dessert first, And so we need to be able to confront that and conquer our passions and live dispassionately if we can. And so the discipline of the body is an important element, and it's not the be all and end all, but it's an important first step in growth in the spiritual life. And Friday is a particularly fitting day to do this in memory of the Lord's crucifixion, when he emptied himself in this very egregious form of physical deprivation that we call, the torture of crucifixion.
Yeah.
So why meat? Why meat? Well, when these canons were written, when these practices were installed in the church in the ancient centuries, meat would have been the luxury food of excess that people had available to them. In the first centuries in Europe and Asia, they didn't have refined sugar. They didn't have a lot in the way of caffeine. They didn't have nicotine.
Refrigeration.
They didn't have refrigeration, right? And so if you wanted to be indulgent, the way to do it would be, gorge on the saturated fat that you would have in meat. One could make the argument that if we were going to rewrite the canons from the ground up, today, given where we are as a culture, the church might say, let's all fast from refined sugar on Fridays, which is another food of excess that I think people tend to gorge probably even more than they do meat. So if you're really looking for things to, not just to sort of, check a box, but really go after what are those things that are those food items or those other activities that really draw me into my passions and away from the life of contemplation. Something else the fathers of the church took a dim view of was too much time in the theaters. They didn't have movies and television back then, or cell phones, but they did have theater, live theater, and they all sort of thought, this can be a distraction from the life of prayer and virtue. So translate that into 21st century terms, might think about fasting from television, fasting from social media, fasting from film, fasting from sugar, caffeine, nicotine, whatever things you tend to grab a hold of your personality and really have a grip on you.
Yeah, in addition to meat, which the church
In addition to meat, which you have to during Lent.
Sure.
Right.
Mariana, is that helpful for you?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for your call. Let's go to Isidro in Atlanta, listening on The Quest. Isidro, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon. How you guys doing?
Great.
So I recently got a new job, and in order for me to get Sundays off, I had to pick a part-time schedule. So I was just wondering, can one go to church twice a week to justify not going on Sundays?
Yeah, thanks. So I would, for one thing to consider is to meet your Sunday obligation, you can, of course, go Saturday night. You can sometimes, in some parishes, go very early in Sunday mornings. And you can go Sunday nights. And depending on where you live, I know if you live in a university town, for example, there are university parishes that have masses as late as 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, right?
Yeah.
So you can get quite creative it doesn't have to be, 10 a.m. Mass at your local parish, to meet that Sunday obligation. If it is absolutely physically impossible for you to make it to any Mass whatsoever at all between, say, Saturday at 4:30 p.m.-ish, to Sunday at 10 p.m., and there's just nothing there that you can do, and this is a necessity for your livelihood, then you would be dispensed from that obligation. But anything else you could do by way of honoring the Sabbath and your prayers and devotions would be advisable. And your idea of going to Mass during the week, daily Mass, would certainly be commendable.
There you go, Isidro. Thanks so much for your call from Atlanta. Glad that you're listening to us on The Quest. Lisa's watching us on Facebook this afternoon. Lisa says, if your marriage was not recognized by the Catholic Church, but you are divorced and have not yet received an annulment and are in a new chaste relationship, would you be allowed to take communion?
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the question. So if you are not living conjugally with someone and you are chaste, then your current marital situation or lack thereof would not be a barrier to communion. Now, if you married outside the church, against the law of the church, that would be something to confess.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would go to confession and say, I did this thing that I wasn't supposed to do, and I'm sorry, and receive absolution, just like you would for any sin. And as long as you're properly disposed, you've made an honest confession of any known mortal sins in your life, then there's no barrier to going to communion. Now, before you get married again, you will need to receive an annulment. However, you told me that you weren't married in the church, so the annulment is a falling off a log easy thing. Many dioceses just have a form on their website for lack of canonical form. You fill it out, then it's a rubber stamp.
What a deal.
Yeah.
And there you go. Hey, Lisa, thanks for watching us this afternoon on YouTube. We do appreciate that. In a moment, we'll be talking with Janet in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. We'll find out where Lansdale is. We'll also talk with Brandon in Oklahoma, Maria in Dallas. A couple of lines are open for you. And if you call right now, we'll hopefully get you on today's program. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to communion in progress on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon here on EWTN.
There are a lot of ways to pray. When I was in the evangelical world, we didn't like rote prayers that the Catholics prayed. Nah, we wanted to say our own prayers. We thought that it was coming more from the heart. Any kind of prayer, whether it comes from the heart and is a loose connection of words, or it is a prayer that the church has had for centuries, is good because it is prayer.
Called to Communion is on YouTube. Search YouTube to find the EWTN YouTube channel, so you'll never miss an episode of our show or any of your favorite EWTN radio shows.
For nearly a century, the National Catholic Register has been moving minds, moving hearts, moving souls, and enriching our readers' lives by spreading the truth of the gospel. Today, that tradition continues with award-winning journalism that goes beyond any secular news service, while bringing much-needed light and clarity to the issues and events that affect you and your family's future. All with faithful and courageous reporting guided by the teachings of the Catholic Church. It's more important than ever to join Catholics who depend on the Register. Get 6 free issues today online at ncregister.com/radio or call 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. That's ncregister.com/radio or call 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. The National Catholic Register. Read faithfully.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. We bring you the truth of the Catholic faith on Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now back to Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders.
Hey, what's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about that here on EWTN's Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 833-288-EWTN is our number, 833-288-3986. Our congratulations going out to a longtime member of the EWTN radio family, St. Paul Catholic Radio in Augusta, Georgia, celebrating their 11th year with us. And that is congratulations going out to John Prohaska and his team at St. Paul Catholic Radio in Augusta from all your friends right here at EWTN Radio. Let me get to a real quick question here from Loida, watching us on YouTube in Hanoi, Vietnam. How about that? Loida wants to know, during what part of the Mass does transubstantiation happen? Thanks and God bless from Vietnam.
Thank you. At the words of institution, this is my body. This is the chalice of the new covenant in my blood.
Yeah, I originally thought it was at the elevation, which is right after that, but it is actually during the words.
Words of institution.
Very good. All right, let's go to Maria, a first-time caller in Dallas, listening on the great Guadalupe Radio, AM 910. Hey, Maria, what's on your mind today?
So I have a question. I have a 16-year-old who has made all the sacraments, and he does not want to go to Mass. I have been, I guess you can say, forcing him to go, and he just basically told me the other day that he doesn't believe in any of it. The more that he goes, the more he hates everything having to do with the Catholic faith, and I don't really have a spouse that backs me up, so I just don't really know what to do. He is our only child living at home. He's our youngest, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question, and I wish I had a silver bullet answer for you. I don't, and I understand the difficulty that parents have with children that really put the brakes on in religious practice. I can't give you the absolute answer. I can give you some just tips and pointers based on my own experience and I think prudence. There is a lot going on here in the child psychology that I don't know about. And there's a lot going on in the child's rejection of the Mass, rejection of the Church, that is not reducible to quibbling over theological propositions. I mean, there's a moral issue here that has to do with relationship to the family, personal responsibility, respect for one's authorities, respect for one's parents, and so the going to Mass or not has become a kind of litmus test, a lightning rod for controversy and for pushing back and for asserting oneself. And to reduce the conflict to an issue of Mass or no Mass is to allow the child to set the terms of the conflict in a way that will deflect from what I suspect are larger moral and psychological issues. And so I would really want to ask questions about, okay, what else in my parenthood, in my child's behavior, in my relationship to my child, am I missing? And can I work at the level of the child's total moral responsibility and life of virtue? Because look, if I force an obstinate, difficult, intransigent child to go to Mass, I may win a battle. I will by no means win the war, as it were.
Yeah.
So does the child do his chores? Is he responsible with his homework? What is his peer life like? What's his use of social media? Is he otherwise respectful? Is he charitable? Does he think about other people? Is he kind? Is he empathetic? And I really don't think that the Mass issue can be treated in abstraction from those things without just, it really could easily become an occasion for inflaming this intransigent, belligerent attitude. It's the belligerent attitude that I'm more worried about than the Mass attendance. What is his name? James Stinson, Catholic parenting expert, has a number of really outstanding books on family dynamics, the life of virtue, and all of the things that really have to take place for Mass attendance to even be fruitful in the first place. In my own family life, I found that there is not a one-to-one correspondence between the intensity of my catechetical and liturgical efforts on the one hand and my children's responsiveness to the Catholic faith on the other. And in fact, sometimes the relationship may be inverted. There may be a negative correlation in that, I have children that are more strongly attached to the faith, who I pushed not as hard in their practice of the faith.
Interesting.
And I think that let me give you an illustration. This is not about Mass attendance, but it's in the life of my father. One of the things that Stinson says, just based on observation, is that in our culture, his experience has been that the children of entrepreneurs, by and large, tend to do better. They have better life outcomes than the children of professionals. And why would that be? What's his theory? Well, professionals, lawyers, doctors, accountants, tend to get up in the morning, leave the home, go to the office, spend all day away from home, come home late at night exhausted. entrepreneurs are more likely to take their kids to work with them. And so the child, is responsible for something at work, probably works for the family business, and moreover, watches their parents exhibit the human virtues in the conduct of their daily affairs.
Mm-hmm.
The child of the professional is more likely to be killing time, on the internet or playing video games. And in my own family, my father was the child of an entrepreneur. And he spent every weekend working in the family business. It was a car rental agency, and Granddaddy used to have him driving all over Alabama, picking up rental cars and trucks and bringing them back home and washing them and preparing them. He, worked his tail off. But my grandfather had one vice as a parent, and that was he lectured his sons morning, noon, and night. And his favorite topic as a Southern Baptist was the evils of alcohol. And so morning, noon, and night, he lectured them about the evils of alcohol. And the sons, my father and his two brothers, just grew absolutely sick of their dad's imperious behavior. And they all grew up to be men of virtue, entrepreneurs and business people who were honest at work and kind to employees and fair-minded and hardworking. They had all of those virtues that they gained by living side by side with my grandfather, and every single one of them drank.
Probably not to excess.
Not to excess. Although I've heard some stories about one of them, but I won't go into that on the air.
Could be a different show. Maria, thank you.
In adolescence, I should say.
Got it. Maria, we hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for your call. Here is Janet now in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Janet, where is Lansdale?
Lansdale is about 1 hour north of Philadelphia.
Now we know. Thank you. What's on your mind today, Janet?
Yes. I'm just wondering, what makes an angel? Both of my parents are passed, and I believe without a doubt that they're in heaven. And I pray for my parents' help and to go to God. I pray to my saints and my guardian angel. But what makes an angel?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. So an angel is a different species from a human being, right? Even as, we're all human beings, we're different individuals, but we're common species. We are not the same species as an angel. And in fact, this may strike you as bizarre, but it's the teaching of the Catholic Church. Every angel is a unique species. So angel is a genus, not a species.
Wow.
And there are philosophical reasons why the Church comes to that conclusion that I won't go into now. But human beings definitely do not become angels. Angels are by nature pure spirit. They have no bodies. Body is not essential to the angelic nature. Body is essential to the human nature. And so when you die, yes, your soul is separated from your body, but that is a temporary condition until the resurrection of the dead when you receive your body back. And so humans enter into everlasting life in an embodied condition. Angels will never be embodied. They're disembodied. Well, disembodied is the wrong word. They're spiritual beings who were never embodied to begin with.
Okay, very good. Janet, thanks so much for your call, and we hope that is helpful for you. Call to Communion here on EWTN. This weekend, be sure to join us for the Catholic Sphere. That's coming up Sunday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. This week, for 50 years, mainline Protestant churches seem to be on the decline. You've probably heard about this or noticed it. So what are the reasons behind these developments, and how can the Catholic Church avoid the same pitfalls? Doug Keck leads this important discussion, and I believe Dr. David Anders was on that program.
I was on that.
Yeah, pretty enlightening, was it?
It was fun. Always enjoy those.
I'll bet it was. The Catholic Sphere coming up Sunday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, right here and only here on EWTN Radio. All right, let's go to Brandon now in Oklahoma, listening on the great Oklahoma Catholic Broadcasting. Hello, Brandon. What's on your mind today, sir?
Yes. My question is, it might sound kind of strange, but I was just looking at the different prayers for the Creed. We have the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed. Why is there two different creeds? Why do we not just focus on one or have just one? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. So there are many creeds in the history of the Catholic tradition. The origin of creeds comes from 1st and 2nd century, when it was necessary for the faithful who were becoming Catholic to recite the faith, to profess the faith at baptism. And so there was a very close connection between the creeds, the early creeds, and baptism. They were in fact baptismal creeds. And so what we know today as the Apostles' Creed is derived from a 2nd century creed known as the Old Roman Symbol. And symbol is another word for creed.
Okay.
And it contains the basic elements that you find in the Apostles' Creed. Now, the Nicene Creed was the first creed that was composed not for use in baptism, but to repudiate a theological error. And the error in question was the error of the heresy of Arianism. Arius was a presbyter in Alexandria that denied the full divinity of Christ. So the Nicene Creed was composed specifically to refute Arianism. Now, that was in 325. What happened is that it didn't altogether work, and Arianism continued in the church, and so a fuller version was produced in 381 at the Council of Constantinople, and that's the one we recite in Mass today. It's known as the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. Try to say that really fast 32 times, and it was, to really nail the last nail in the coffin of Arianism. And in subsequent centuries, there were new Christological heresies that arose and new creeds and confessions produced by subsequent councils to repudiate them. And so the history of creeds is often the history of articulating the faith in a way that repudiates some particular error. Now, as to why we might use one or the other in Mass, the Nicene Creed is the usual creed that we would say in Mass because it's the fullest expression of the identity of our Lord, and that's the theology that we want to confess. The Apostles' Creed is shorter and uses less philosophical language, and so it can be appropriate, for example, in a Mass said specifically for children.
Okay. So the Apostles' Creed could be used in a Mass.
There are occasions when it can be used, but you're normally supposed to use the Nicene Creed.
Got it. Hey, Brandon, thanks so much for your call. Here is John now in Columbus listening on the great St. Gabriel radio. John, what's on your mind today, sir?
Well, I'm thinking about purgatory. David, I read a book about a year and a half ago by Reverend Father F.X. Shoup, S.J., a theologian from the 19th century. And he wrote about purgatory and explained in great detail the fires of purgatory. And he put in the book stories of people like St. Bridget of Sweden, St. Gertrude, St. Margaret Mary, the Curie of Ars, and people like that. And he talked about purgatory as being a very burning place, a place where it was a very unpleasant place in his mind. And through the stories that he got from these mystics, is there any truth, do you think, in any of that?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question. So the Church does not tell us in what precisely the purifications of purgatory consist. The dogma of the faith is that there is a purgatory and that it has these effects, that it purifies the soul from attachment to sin and gives us an opportunity to make reparation. Beyond that, it's theological opinion. Now, it's true that there are a number of saints that allege private revelations about the nature of purgatory or hell or heaven, for that matter, but these are private revelations, and they are not part of the Church's public dogmatic teaching, and no Catholic is bound to hold them. The dialogues of Catherine of Genoa about purgatory also purport to be private revelation, and yet they give a different picture of purgatory from the one that you described. I will tell you, look, you do not have to believe what I'm getting ready to tell you. Right? This is my private theological speculation belonging to me, myself, and I. It is not the public teaching of the Catholic Church, and though I arrived at this by reading Catherine of Genoa, who's a saint, but again, you're free to dismiss it. All right, but to me, it makes a lot of sense. When you look at the book of Isaiah chapter 6, and Isaiah sees God, he says, oops, woe is me. Every time in the Old Testament someone confronts the angel of the Lord, the angel of the Lord's first thing is, hey, don't worry, you're not going to die. Right? Meaning that if we come face to face with the Lord, our natural response is going to be fear, terror, awe, and a profound awareness of our inadequacy, of those stains on our soul that need cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, God is love. God's character is love. God is not hate. So how can it be that a confrontation with infinite effusive love could evoke this sort of painful awareness of myself? And I liken it to an experience I had growing up, when I was maybe not the world's greatest guy. And I would go get around my holy and righteous grandfather, who really was a loving and wonderful man, and he never said a word of rebuke to me. And yet, the knowledge of my own sins, in the presence of his kind, benevolent regard, his kindness was more painful in some respect than all the nagging that my mother could produce, because it was, I recognized that it was so undeserved, or at least I felt that way about myself. In comparison to his kind regard. And so I sort of put these images and ideas together with the idea that the soul that confronts the infinite beauty, majesty, and love of God, if that soul is not ready for that, if that soul has not purged itself of attachment to sin, the very love of God can be experienced as a kind of fire to the conscience. And so infinite accepting love can simultaneously purge me of that narcissistic self-regard in one instant, if necessary, or over a long period of time, as divine providence determines. For me, that is a picture of purgatory that makes sense. It does not conflict with the teaching of the church, but if you would prefer the smoking fire pots, and the pitchforks, have at it.
John, thanks so much for your call. Here is Jim now, a first-time caller from Portland, listening on the great Modern Day Radio. Hello, Jim. What's on your mind today?
Well, I had a question on, what is it, transubstantiation, impanation, and consubstantiation. Why is the first dogma and the other two heresies, they seem to closely approximate. And I think it would take a theologian to quibble with any of them. It seems, why is it a heresy? And if it's a heresy, it's a petty one, it would seem like. I mean, they're awfully close.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's because Jesus says, is my body. Not hypostatically united to my body, not contains my body, is my body.
Period.
That's
it. Jim, thanks so much for your call. And let's go down to Louise, listening to us in Denver on the TuneIn app. Hey, Louise, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So just wondering, I was in a theology class once, and my professor said that once you get to heaven, if you're married, you are no longer married. And I think I understand what he was trying to say, but if you could maybe explain it again. I talked with my husband about it, and he said that makes me sad. So I didn't have a good response.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So your husband does not need to be sad, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, it's true that we are not married, nor are we given in marriage in heaven. We become not angels, but like the angels in that respect, right? Because there's no more replenishment of the human race. There's no need for conjugal or sexual union. There's no physical reproduction in heaven, and so no need for the sacrament of matrimony. But that does not mean that your spouse is not special to you in heaven. And so some people think it's a kind of all or nothing affair. Like if we're not married, well, so what does the vow of marriage do for you on earth, right? Well, number one, it's a promise of lifelong fidelity, and it's a promise of fidelity. Like I'm united with you and only you in this way. I'm off limits to other women or to other men, as the case may be. Now, since there's no sexual union in heaven, like you don't need the vow of marriage to protect the integrity of the union from interlopers. Like there can't be any adultery in heaven either, you see. So that kind of fidelity just becomes beside the point. But that doesn't destroy the unique nature of marital friendship, because keep in mind, in heaven, we don't have our memories wiped. We don't have our memories wiped in heaven. We retain knowledge of our human lives, of our lives of virtue and good works and friendship together. And so when I'm in heaven, I will look at my wife, Jill, and we will know each other as having been husband and wife and have all that memory and all that history at our disposal. And as much as I'm going to love Tom Price in heaven, I'm not going to love him that way. I mean, Tom and I, hopefully, if we get there, will go, hey, you remember all those years on Call to Communion and what a blast that was? And to Jill, I'll say, hey, do you remember all those years of raising children and how difficult and wonderful that was? And all of that will play into the glory and the rewards of heaven as we see how these relationships played into divine providence to bring us and hopefully our families to sanctity. So far from being something to be sad about or to mourn, the reward of the just in heaven, those that are married, will be the fruition. It'll be the culmination. It'll be the celebration of that marital life and all that it did to bring you to holiness and all those joys that you had in common and those sorrows that you suffered together. None of that is lost. But there's just no more need for a vow of fidelity because there's no cheating and there's no need for continence in a world without sex.
Louise, thanks so much, and we hope that's helpful for you and for your husband as well. Appreciate your call from Denver. Sheila Marie is watching us on YouTube this afternoon. Sheila Marie says, Dr. Anders, when and why are there Catholic cemeteries? When did Catholics want to be buried separately from Protestants, and why was this done? Thank you, Sheila Marie.
Okay, thanks. So Catholic cemeteries predate Protestants by about 1,500 years.
Yep.
Right. So it's not like Catholics one day woke up and said, hey, we'd like to be buried differently from Protestants. It's the other way around. It's the Protestants who said, hey, we want to separate ourselves from Catholic burial practice. Catholic burial practice goes back to the first century, and the reason for setting aside a consecrated space is twofold. One, to pray for and remember the dead, and two, if the dead are saints, to venerate their relics and to seek their intercession. And so the particular Catholic understanding of the relationship of the blessed dead or the suffering church to their physical relics is intimately connected to the idea of Catholic burial. Now, Protestants rejected all of that, and so they wanted nothing to do with it.
So there it is. Appreciate that, and thanks, Sheila Marie, for checking in on YouTube. Juan in Fort Worth, we have about a minute left. What's your question today, Juan?
Yes, in the Protestant Bible, it says a marriage is dissoluble by fornication, and in the Catholic Bible, it says unless it was unlawful from the time of the marriage. Can you explain that?
Yes, it's the same Greek word, porneia, in each case. There's a difference in the way Catholics and Protestants interpret that word. The word for adultery in Greek is mokeia, and Christ does not say that you can divorce in case of mokeia, but in cases of porneia, the same thing that is ruled out in Acts chapter 15, along with eating the meat of strangled animals and other peculiarities of the Jewish law. And so we find sort of an elaboration of this in St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, when he tells a man to repudiate the woman that he's living with because she was his father's wife. And so it would seem to have violated Jewish laws on consanguinity, like the relationship of proximity to relatives and so forth, that would render a marriage invalid. And so from Acts and Corinthians and the passages in Matthew, as well as early church practice, it seems that it's much more reasonable to understand this to be unlawfulness of marriage rather than, hey, my lawful wife committed adultery, therefore I'm going to dump her.
There you go, Juan. Thanks so much for your call. I'm glad we could squeeze you in there at the end of the program. Hey, Dr. David Anders, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Don't forget, we do this program Monday through Friday, Call to Communion, 2 p.m. Eastern, with an encore at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. on the West Coast. Check out the podcast anytime at EWTN.com/radio, or you can go directly to it, EWTNradio.net. On behalf of our fantastic team, I'm Tom Price along with Dr. David Anders. Hey, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow on the Thursday edition of Call to Communion. Have a great day and God bless.
The most original and exclusive